I've got three talented folks here on the stage. I'm Elliot. I lead product design here at Hightouch. Thank you. I've collected here, we've got Allie Vogel, Cassie, and Joey, and I'm gonna let them do their intros for what their business is and what they're doing. You wanna start us, Allie?
Hi, thank you so much for coming out tonight. My name is Allie Vogel. I am the founder of Flexxi Studio. We are a product design and creative studio that works with both product and marketing teams.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Good? I'm Cassie McDaniel. I am the VP of Design at Medium. Do people know what Medium is? Who writes on Medium? Anybody? Yeah? All right, cool. Yeah, so we build a product that helps people publish their ideas. So it's accessible to anybody and good mission, I think.
Hey, I'm Joey. It's great to see all of you. Thanks for being here. It's still weird to say, but I have a company called Baseline Design. We're based in Columbus, Ohio, if anyone's in the Midwest. Anyone? Maybe? Okay, cool. We do design systems. We teach a lot about Figma. We teach a lot about tooling. We try to understand the changes in tooling. And there's 6 of us and growing. So glad to be here. Excited to share with you all, learning at the same pace that you all are. So yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. All right, so I'm just going to dive into some of the questions that I've got for these folks up here. So, Cassie, as so much around design is changing, what core skills are still the same, and what new skills are required?
I think that the industry is always changing. So, the skills that you need, the typography, layout, and technically as well, are just always kind of changing and always adapting. So I don't think it's necessarily AI that's changing things. But I would say the things that are stable have always been stable. So I would say soft skills. I don't think that's ever going to go away either. The ability to get somebody excited about your idea, to kind of convince them that your design thinking is the way to go. The technical skills will come and go. It's not that you should ignore them. But the soft skills are this foundation. The way that you think as a designer is not going to go away. The other thing that's kind of interesting from Medium's perspective is that the interface for interacting with AI right now is a text box. So it's like everything that you're trying to do with AI, you have to write to be able to do it. So I've always thought that writing is a useful skill for a designer to have. And now I think it's a necessary skill to be able to be specific, to communicate well, to know what isn't working and what you're trying to communicate, and then correct that. So I don't know, we kind of at Medium talk about being in a writing renaissance, which might be a little bit of a stretch, but it might be around the corner, because I do think that that's how we are currently interacting with AI through words.
Yeah. So. Yeah, those core skills of communication with the robot or with the humans.
I still always say thanks, though.
Yeah,
always.
Joey, what's something that your clients are asking for now that they weren't a year ago?
I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think the word that I came up with to try to summarize it is just like perspective. A couple of years ago, and I think this was true whether you're consulting or a designer or in-house, your job was like to provide a solution, like a very direct, like here's your problem, here's exactly what you need to do, right? And I think, if I'm being honest, like the reason I'm struggling a lot, I think maybe we're all struggling a lot, is because like there is no answer anymore. It's like you might have an answer, but the expiration on that is so fast, right? Like it could be over by, who knows what tomorrow's gonna bring, right? And config, it could all be different by Friday. And so what I'm learning is that I think a lot of companies and clients are kind of tired of being told like, here's exactly what you need to do. Go do this, right? Because they can do it, and then they realize, like, oh, that's not even relevant anymore. And it kind of reminds me of, remember being in school, like, and you were learning, and you're like, when am I going to use this, right? I still have these thoughts. And I feel, and now that we're a little bit older, we all realize, well, actually, we were kind of just learning how to learn, right? And I think our job now in consulting and as designers and as we practice is just trying to maybe reshare that a little bit. Like, and one thing I'll call out here is, I think a lot of us in the room, probably as designers or engineers or product people, I think we're all a little anxious because we're kind of always wondering, like, what is the other person doing? What is the other team doing? What is the other industry doing, right? And no one can really admit, that maybe they don't know, or it's hard to admit that. And so I think the value right now is in teaching or sharing, here's kind of what we're seeing work, but here's the approach they took to get there, so that as the tools change, you can change with them, right? Something I just thought about on the way here is, like, we never introduce ourselves as like, hey, I'm Joey and I use Figma, right? Or hey, I'm Joey and I use Photoshop. We're like, hey, I'm Joey and I'm a designer. And I think many of us are designers and we love what we do. And I think that is always going to be true as we talk about teaching others how to do this work. So I guess a lot of thoughts there, but maybe the word to land on is perspective.
Can I jump in? Yeah, I also think that design is a way of thinking more than anything else. I've worked in a lot of different industries for in startups and healthcare. For myself, I've had my own studio as well. And the consistent thread throughout that is the line of questioning and a way of thinking about things differently than other people that you're working with, which is valuable. Yep. There's a real value to that.
Allie, I'm curious, when a company comes to you wanting to add AI to their product, what do you tell them and where do you even start?
That's a great question, because there's really two different trains of thought on that. There's designing for AI, so actually building AI native products or integrating AI features into the product a company is building. And then there's designing with AI, which is essentially using AI workflows to help augment the productivity of the team. And first we have to define what the client actually wants. A big shift for us has been working only with tech companies to actually working with non-tech companies that want to work with AI, because it's so attractive and appealing. A lot of us do work with AI, either designing for AI or designing with AI, so we know how to do it. But if you look at other industries like financial services or insurance, this isn't their core business. So they're not necessarily going to invest in hiring directly for this. So oftentimes they go to studios or agencies or consultancies to help them do the work. So the first thing is really defining, well, what exactly with AI do you want to do? Is this a workflow question, or is this a core feature or core product specification that we actually have to build for? So that's the first step. And then once we actually understand what the company wants to do, for example, build a AI-powered insurance platform, or rather use AI to build out more of their workflows, only then can we start to help make recommendations for them.
Do you feel like it's easy to feel like you're behind in AI, but when you're talking to some of these different companies that are not in that tech scene, does that shift your perspective on where you feel like you are on that edge?
Like Joey said, I think that as tech-forward designers, we're always going to feel behind, because the next tool is always around the corner and the next model, and we see amazing people all over the internet that are doing incredible things with the technology. I see my friend over here shaking his head because he's like, oh my gosh, I feel that so much. And at Flexxi, it's something that we try to live by all the time. So we even build our own internal tooling for ourselves first to be able to play with the technology to see if it's even worth building with. So first off, it's practicing what you preach and just taking time to explore and experiment and see if the hype is actually worth it. And then from there, it's really seeing how far you can go with it and not just using AI for the sake of using AI, but rather understanding if it's going to add real value. And from my perspective and what we've seen at Flexxi is that when you're actually building for the core value of the company, even our own, and you're not treating each thing as independent actors, but rather understanding how to put everything together in a workflow, or the product itself being a workflow that saves time, saves money, saves resources for the company, that's when you really start seeing the value. And that's really when the investment becomes worth it in learning the different models, technology, tooling, whatever it may be that's coming out.
Sure.
Like, if I can jump in, I don't think anyone wants AI, right? They want like something through AI. And something I feel like I'm struggling with it in terms of thoughts is we work with a lot of companies where there's a very heavy, and I'm sure maybe many of you are feeling this, but there's a very heavy like top-down mandate to use AI, right? Like, we've bought all these credits, we've got to use them. How are we using AI, right? And I think maybe part of the anxiety that I'm feeling is I'm sitting here wondering like, well, okay, how do we use AI? That's a huge question, right? But we're not really, something I hope we can continue to do as designers is ask ourselves like, well, what is the goal? Are we trying to be a bit more efficient? Are we trying to offload things? Are we trying to make room for other things? Are we trying to speed up things that were often slow? And I think last year was all about like exploring this technology, right? And being like, what the heck can this even do? Is it useful? And now I think we're getting to the point where we're starting to have a lot of those answers. But I also think it's really important that we start thinking about pushing back in the right ways of like, well, are we just using it to use it, or are we using it to do something with it? And that's something we're trying to think a lot about, and I'm sure you are as well. I mean, we're designers, right? Like, we're asking the questions like, well, what's the problem to solve, right? And the problem's not we got to use AI. The problem's like, well, what's our user wanting, right?
I think the tricky part is really all the buzz that AI has had. And so people hear the buzzword and they're like, I want that.
Yeah.
You know, and so you have to figure out how to gracefully say no.
Yeah.
Or, you know, find the reason behind the reason. And sometimes it's just because we want to appear more innovative. Yeah. And that's valid. You just have to find the real why. The why behind the why. We talk about 3 whys, and you know, just keep asking why, and eventually you'll get to the root and be able to solve that problem a little bit better, whether it's with AI or not.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Something a bit controversial that actually I was speaking with one of my colleagues yesterday about is we were talking about cost, and we were looking at some of our workflows, and we were like, is it more expensive to be running this as agents and as workflows than it is to actually be doing this manually and having just a person implement that? And I think that's something that we're feeling a lot today, and we're seeing a lot of our partners and our clients feel as well today, which is essentially the cost of using AI, whether it be building out the workflows or, you know, using the credits, is costly. And we have to ask ourselves this ROI question as business-minded designers of, does it actually make sense? And I think that's a lot of what Joey was alluding to when he said, well, we have to really understand the value of it and look at the cost of it as well. And it is our responsibility as designers both to think about things from the craft and technology perspective, but also the businesses that we're supporting, and really ask ourselves, are we using AI for the sake of AI? Does this have a real ROI? And does it make sense to integrate this into our product? So I think compared to last year where we were kind of questioning the value of it, now we're questioning the value of it in a different way.
I just heard the term today, value maxing. Has anyone else heard this? Last week was like token maxing, and this week is like, oh my gosh, the bill came in, value maxing. So we're running with that.
Cassie, I'm curious, as engineering has sped up in your org, how has that affected the way that you all do design?
It's really hard. This thing is the way that designers and engineers work today. I feel like we reached a really good kind of like stable spot where you've got the three-legged stool, and design and product and engineering all work together seamlessly, it seemed, and you had your PRD, and like there was a process that every organization started to follow. There was like everybody agreed that this was the best way. And then AI really has changed things. There's a designer on my team who she'd be screen sharing her designs with the engineers and the rest of the team. And like by the end of the call, he had built a prototype. Like there is no handoff. There is no like QA. There's no documentation. And as a business, we can't really capitalize on the benefits of AI unless design can figure out how to keep up with that. We talk a little bit about the long pole in our organizations or our projects or our teams, which is in a circus tent, like the pole that holds everything up. It's like the thing that is not necessarily foundational, but that is slowing everything else down. And that's shifted. It used to be engineering. That the longest part of the process was engineering. Now, for us, it's design and product decisions. And I think to some degree that's okay. You should take your time to figure out what your reasons are, where you're going. Sometimes that's a time-intensive thing. But I do think design has to change a little bit about how we work, especially how we collaborate with other people. And again, this is not a settled thing. So I feel like everyone in this room is probably inventing it right now. It's something we kind of have to figure out what that next generation is going to look like. And I think that's exciting. I think we had gotten to a part. Sorry, I'm passionate about this. We had gotten to a point where the web became really systematized, and I think it got a little boring. I think like when we had Flash 20 years ago or whatever, that was fun. And I'm excited about how AI is really democratizing the access to build creative ideas again. I think that's really awesome. And yeah, it does mean that sometimes people are going to use AI to create mock-ups. It is going to replace some of the things that we were doing, but we'll find another thing to do. I'm not worried about design. We're gonna find some other way to contribute. But the root of it, if we get more people being able to express their ideas and build their ideas, that's kind of awesome. It's changing things in a remarkable number of ways. But I think as a creative person at my core, I'm like, that's cool. I like that.
I can finally make that leather texture that I never learned how to make. But I mean, it's really interesting. I just heard a story today of a PM at a company, and she's amazing. And she saw a problem that was happening for a client, and she jumped in, created a PR, basically just through using Claude Code. And the thing that stuck out there was not how interesting and cool and amazing that is, right? To be a PM and to be able to take a problem and be like, I know how to change that. I'm not going to bug the team. That's amazing, right? The thing that I thought about when she told that story was, oh my God, how is design involved? How do they even know that change went live? And how, for all of us, I think one problem that I know I'm facing is the source of truth today just looks a lot different, right? And so I think we are finding more and more ways to collaborate and do things that we've never done before, but I also think it's kind of shifting the role of design in the process, right? We might not be doing the work as much or thinking about it because others are doing, but I think just as I think one of our biggest strengths against, or with AI is judgment. I think that's our biggest value on a team, right? Is helping anyone push something out there, but to also kind of be the people that set the expectations for what feels good to put out there, Yeah.
At Medium, one of the interesting things about the way we're working now, we don't have a product team. This is not for everyone, and that's another story. But what we're trying to do really is future-proof our staff in many ways. Is there's this overlap of skills. Are you a designer or are you an engineer? Do you know anymore? So we have a specialized role we're calling project leads that we're like trying to develop product thinking in some of our design roles and engineering roles. And we're kind of moving toward this feeling that, well, we're just builders, and like, what is our title even anymore, you know? And a lot of our designers too are shipping code. In fact, every designer on our team has shipped a PR. And that's great too, because we don't have to depend on somebody else to prioritize the quality of life improvements that we're always advocating for. So I feel like that debate is settled. Like, should designers code? Like, yeah.
I don't have to memorize the Git commands anymore.
Yeah.
Like, as designers and PMs and engineers all kind of shift towards the middle of being that product builder, what do you think is the unique skill that design still brings to the table a couple of years from now?
I do think I think it's the judgment, it's the reasoning, it's the ability to think about something and either accept an answer or not accept an answer. Like, the 3 whys. Like, you kind of know when somebody's, it's not quite the truth of what, and they're not lying, but you haven't gotten to the heart of it. I think that's really valuable still, regardless of what your output is. That ability to shape a problem is still really valuable, and I think pretty design specific. It's not, that skill is accessible to other people, but I think designers tend to be good at that.
Yeah, I would say that it's the specialization of craft. You and I, Elliot, for many years have always talked about putting in those 1,000 hours to become a specialist. And I would say this is true for other roles, such as engineering. Back in 2017, when I worked at Booking.com, we as designers actually did have to take coding tests to get hired as a UX designer, which was pretty novel at the time. And we would ship code in Perl, believe it or not, to production. So a lot of the experiments that you would see on the Booking.com website were shipped by designers. Now, it didn't mean that we did it well. There are engineers, there are people that are specialists in development that understood the intricacies of that coding language much better than a designer. And I still believe that that holds true today. Even with the tooling that we have, there's still a lot of mistakes, there's still a lot of checks that need to be made, and that is true for code, and it's also true for design. We've seen this AI slop that everyone talks about, or the stench of AI, where you see just interfaces looking so similar to one another, and there is a truth to studying a craft, to getting in those 1,000 hours of practice. So even if we have these hybrid builder roles where designers can do strategy and push code into production and do design, and engineers and product people and business people can all do these hybrid types of roles, there still is something so true to having a specialization in a craft. And that's where we see specialized studios really coming up, because sometimes you just want to leave things to an expert. And I think that's becoming more and more true as the roles become more general, whereas specialists will have a really specific place. Brand designers who are amazing at brand, or logo designers who are amazing at creating specialized and memorable logos, they will have a really important place in the industry. So I think that's something to not forget.
Did not think we were going to be talking about Perl tonight, but I'm pumped. One thing I do want to note is, like, the reason that we're even able to define like AI slop or something feels off, or like this just isn't quite right, is because we are so good at it, And I think something that I'm trying to pay attention to personally is we like look at the output of something from Claude Design, for example, and we're like, wow, that's pretty good, right? Like, it didn't get all the way there, but that's pretty good. And I guess I'm trying to challenge myself to come at it from the other perspective, where it's like, I think I know what good design is. I don't know if I can create it, but I think I know when I see it, right? And I feel that coming from the other side of being like, this is pretty good, but like I would have done all of these things differently, that's the part that I think is worth all of us like continuing to invest in. And yeah, I think the last couple years, the words that have always come to mind are like craft, judgment, and what was the other one? Taste, right? And I think the word that maybe comes out of all of those is just like staying curious. And it's hard to tell a room to be like, just stay curious, right? No one has anything going on, right? It's a little extra work. But what I've found, at least, is by trying to stay open to what is coming out of some of these outputs or what these tools are producing is, I guess, staying curious in the sense of like, could I make that thing on my own? Or do I know why this is bad? Or do I know why this is good? Or do I agree with some of these like spacing or typography-based decisions? Or do I know why like that color combination makes sense or doesn't make sense? And I guess for all of us, like as these tools get better, I think at the rate that they get better, it's also important for us to continue to get better so that we can continue to evaluate like the output of those tools. That I think is going to be the role of design as we go forward more and more.
I feel a little bit more extreme about it. I work in a business that has been deeply affected by AI. There's so much slop on any social media platform, right? And we've had to change a lot of things in how Medium works. And maybe that's giving me a particular perspective, but the other thing is just how long I've been around in the industry, and like the changes that have happened before have been more gradual. This change is like phenomenally fast. And it's changing all the time. Like, do I think taste is going to be the designer's job? I don't really think so. And I think that that AI is just going to keep getting more powerful. And I don't say that to scare anybody, just to be realistic, because it behooves that industry to make sure that it keeps getting better and more accurate. And the reason is because it is delivering a value. We have made tech inaccessible. Most people can't use it or build with it. They have to hire us, experts, to do that. And it's breaking down a barrier to make it more accessible to people who have real problems that need to be solved. So will AI be able to generate the best logo in the world? No, but might it be passable for somebody who has a startup or a small business? I think probably. And so my question to the room is really like, what are you doing to diversify yourself against that? And I think what design in particular is really good at is sniffing out the value. Like if, there's so many things that we do that you're like, that doesn't matter, or that doesn't matter, or that, I'm gonna change that. But if you are really trying to get at the heart of what the value is that you're delivering, I think that's a little bit more future-proof.
Yeah. Joey, you sell expertise in design systems, something that AI is rapidly changing. What do you think of your services do you think will be non-existent in the next 2 years, and what do you think is the part that AI can't touch?
I think it's coming for a lot of things that, to be honest, like I love in design systems. Like I got into design systems and into Figma because I just love being in Figma. Like spend all day like making components. Like I was there for the love of the game, and I'm sure many of us were as well. And so I feel sad saying this, but realistic in the sense of I think it's coming for a lot in terms of, even in my own work, I used to sit down for an hour and like create the perfect button component with 2,000 variants or whatever it was, right? Like it was so fun. And now it's like I'm just like Claude, help me out here, and it does an awesome job. I think the mistake, though, or maybe where my answer is going, is by thinking that a design system is just those components and tokens and presentations of components, right? And documentation even. I think what really a design system is that's always going to be there is a design system is nothing but like a shared set of decisions internally, right? Like we are the team that's, when I was working at Twitter for a couple of years, and there it was amazing because all we did is we kind of sat in the center and we went from team to team to team to help them understand like what was available and what was coming and what they needed, and it was just an incredible experience. And it's like that set of decisions as things move so fast to production from idea now, I think that becomes even more important. And so designed systems, I feel grateful. I think they're going to be around for a really long time, but I think the artifact of it, or like the work, or like I think it's going to change a little bit. And to be honest, like I'm still kind of coming to terms with that. Like it's really fun to use Claude, but I'm also like, man, I loved creating those components. You know, I loved like making that token set. I loved doing the naming, and now it's like I don't know if that's the best use of time, right? So I think there's a lot that's going to stay, but I think there's also a lot that's changing. But the main thing is like it always comes down to what you said, and just decisions and judgment, and like being there to help capture those things internally that have actually gone to production or have actually made the difference.
Yeah, and I think I just want to be clear that like there's plenty of work. Like
there's so much work.
we're not going to run out of work. I think you just have to figure out how to be helpful. And that's the stance that I've taken in my career, and I feel like it's done pretty well. Like it's how do you work with a team as a whole to do big things? Like you still need a lot of people to do that. You need less and less in some ways, but I still think there's a magic that happens when multiple humans come together to try to solve something together that AI doesn't replicate.
To the point of what Joey was saying, it's really about having this flexible mindset, which is something that as designers we've been hearing about a lot. It's actually where the name Flexxi comes from, right? Because the best products, the ones that stand the test of time, are the ones that are the most flexible across different use cases, flexible across different devices. And this is now more true than ever. Joey is talking about his business, but he's also saying, yeah, this is going to change and evolve. And I, as a designer, someone who loves design systems and has made an entire career out of it, have to be flexible to understand that my role and my studio is going to change. And we've seen that so much in Flexxi because our entire ICP, our entire ideal customer profile has changed. We went from only working with tech companies to understanding that actually maybe the people that need the most help are not necessarily tech companies, but companies that want to be tech enabled. So for everyone in this room, everyone that's working on product or brand or engineering, we understand that with the new changes in the industry that are only evolving faster and faster, we have to understand where we can bring the most value, and understanding the businesses that we're servicing as designers, as product people. This is only going to be more and more important.
I'm curious, Allie, what's been your experience with AI burnout for yourself, with your team? What have you observed?
So this is a great topic because it's actually a really painful one. Last year, we had two of the best visual designers on our team both quit within 2 weeks of each other. And as someone who runs the studio, this was both extremely stressful and sad because the reason for them quitting was not necessarily leaving Flexxi, but wanting to leave the tech industry as a whole. And one of the designers who left on our team actually left to become a professional DJ, which she lives in Barcelona, she plays all over Berlin, like it's super cool for her, very sad for us because she's amazing. And when we were having this conversation, of course I asked her, well, is there anything that we can do to convince you to stay? And she just said, no, this industry isn't for me. I don't want to use AI. I don't want to integrate it into our workflows. I want to have the freedom to make 20 iterations of a hero section if I want to. And we had to have that conversation that that's just not where the industry is anymore, because speed and quality is something that clients or internal clients, if you're working in-house, just expect as a given. And there just isn't necessarily that space from a production standpoint to do that. So for her, as someone who is extremely creative, it just wasn't a fit as an industry anymore. And so having this burnout because the pace is increasing and the ability or just almost the requirement for sameness, but having that unique twist, the pressure was just mounting. And then the other designer actually left to join CPG, consumer packaged goods. And again, 2 weeks later, having the same conversation with someone who's like, I just want to be able to feel and see and touch what I'm designing. Like, it brings me so much joy to actually see a bottle of olive oil being sold on the shelf for a label that I designed. And it was really hard for me to understand because, of course, I wanted to retain them. So I was like using every trick in my book to try to get them to stay. But then actually, a couple months ago, I started making jewelry, gold jewelry. And I started really having this strong, urging desire to start using my hands and doing something physical as well. And so even though I still love the industry and feel like it's so important and there's so many important things to do, I think now I can understand a little bit better why very creative people are feeling this AI burnout. And I think a good solution for this is, if you don't want to leave the industry to become a professional DJ, if that's not your calling, just picking up more hobbies. For those of you that don't know, Elliot is the king of hobbies. You have so many hobbies. And that's always something I've really admired about you. And so I think that now more than ever, as design is becoming more and more commoditized, this is our opportunity as creatives to avoid some of this AI burnout by trying new different types of crafts, whether it be sewing or goldsmithing or DJing, if that's your thing. So this is something we at Flexxi definitely have seen and experienced. I've unfortunately experienced this with my team, so I'm curious if anyone else has had these challenges or felt this way. Feel free to come talk to me afterwards. We can, definitely talk about, what that feeling is like, because it's very real.
So Allie is goldsmithing, and I bought a Lego set last weekend, so I don't know. I'm trying. I have so many thoughts on this. I just from this new era of design, like, it is so darn cool to like have an idea and then to like put it out there and feel it and see it and use it. Like, that's amazing, right? But my experience is I was building a little app for myself a couple weeks ago, and it took me a couple hours, and I was in Cursor and I was prompting the whole time, and at the end I asked, like, how many prompts did this take? And it was like 108 prompts or something. And what did I do when it was running? I just like checked Slack and like looked at YouTube real quick and like, let it run. And in the back of my mind, like, are all the voices of like, oh my gosh, you're closer to code than you've ever been before. But in reality, like, I have no idea what the code was doing. It was just on my screen, like it was close, right? But I had no idea what it was doing. And I think the other thing that often leads to burnout in design is not only not necessarily being as close to it, but at least in the early days of AI, and this is where I'm actually very excited about where I hope Figma goes, is we often, like, as designers, I think for me, or at least many people I know, like the fun and the joy in design is like that really messy middle, right? You have a problem and you're like, I'm relatively pumped to figure this out, right? I love design. And you're like going through all these iterations, and you're up late at night, and you're in the shower, and then you have this idea, and you're like, I think I know how I want to solve that, right? And then you go back to the canvas, and you're like, music on, it's late at night, like, at least if you're me. My wife, past thoughts. But it's like, that's the joy, right? And I think often when we're working with AI tooling, it's like we almost have to have the solution in mind when we start. And it's like that opportunity cost, I think, is very real, and something that a lot of tools like Figma are beginning to start to address a little bit. But at least for me and how I feel about design, like, I really miss that. And I'm trying to hold on to that feeling of just like open canvas. Like, what do I want to do? Like, how do I want to challenge myself to like push to maybe create a new shadow or texture, like a pattern of iteration, of maybe usability, right? And So I think as we talk about all of this, like that's one thing I'm really trying to hold on to avoid that burnout is like, where do I feel that joy in design? Like it is really cool to see it, but it's also really darn fun to make it. So
I hope that you find that in other places too. You know, I think that like listening to where that's happening for you is really important because, like I said, the skills are going to change, and if you can tap into that, I think that's a practice more than it is like a final destination. It's like you're always having to really assess that. For us, the AI, you know, I think the burnout piece is more in the acceleration of the decision making. So it's like you can get from 0 to 100 so much faster than you used to be able to. And so those decision points become really compressed. And you're having to make decisions more frequently, which is really tough. Like, it's just exhausting. Like, okay, I see so many heads nodding. It's so exhausting. When, you know, somebody just generates a doc and then you have to review it. And it takes so long to review it because it fucking made like 10 pages when it should have been 1. And
like make it shorter. Here's 12.
Yeah. It's exhausting, and that's something that we're trying to pay attention to too. Is like don't give your colleagues work slop, you know. And so it's not just about the things that are generated in the process that are useful, but the things that are generated in the process that are not useful. And can you leave those things behind? Walking meetings are my break. It's a good way to decompress when you've got this just huge acceleration of the whole industry. You know, the expectations to go faster there, but you actually really can go faster too. But faster toward what? You know, faster toward what?
I was talking with the people I feel very like. I know I would have a tough time as like if I were an engineer. I was talking with an engineering manager yesterday, and he was saying that they do like monthly just sentiment reports on the team, which is awesome. And they, in the last 12 months, have discovered that productivity has never been higher, right? But at the same time, the next question was like, how happy are you in this job? And he was saying it's never been lower. And I can't mention the company, but it's a very big company that we're all familiar with. And that's really interesting, right? Because it's when I think about the role of engineers now, one person just told me like, you know, remember like tab to completion, like how amazing that was? And now we're all running like hundreds of agents at the same time. So on like the decision fatigue that you're mentioning like that, gosh, that's so real. To sit there and manage like all of these things that are happening at different times as they carry on, and to have to carry the weight of like how that is moving forward while not necessarily writing code, like that's a tough thing. So I think it's going to be interesting to see like how their role changes, how our role changes to match it. And it is like back to writing and decision making, like so much of that is, it's awesome, but it's also hard, I think, for just, it's hard to break away from the area where we started, right? And it's maybe not the correct feeling all the time, but it feels like a very real one right now.
Yeah, I think the paradox of AI is that we all kind of hate it, but we also couldn't really do our jobs without it at this point, you know? So I think you have to kind of find your way through that question and find peace for yourself with it in some way. I mean, we have to do that as an industry, but also just individually. And like the critiques of AI are not wrong. It did steal a lot of creative work to build this. You know, it isn't great for the environment. But so we just have to figure out what that balance is. You know, how do we balance all of these questions?
I want to open it up to the group here. If anybody has any questions. I see a hand back here already. Saw your hand shoot up first.
Thank you so much for the panel. Especially Cassie, I was reflecting so much with you when you said like you have to keep practicing. Don't just stay with it. Just keep practicing, and that was so reflective. And thank you so much for that. I just want to ask one very important question that we are going through as a company. For example, we have figured out, hey, every month or every week, a new version of model is going to come, and it's just going to keep improving. And then so we just took a cautious decision, hey, let's be open to AI, right? And then just let's embrace it, and any ups or downs, let's just go with the flow. But with respect to hiring, especially like the younger folks, right? Like, so really couldn't crack that. Should we still hire them? Or if we want to hire them, what kind of persona we want to look for them in the current era, right? And because it's very important. I've been talking with a lot of people. I'm coming from India, by the way. Like I just flew for Figma. Very fun here. So I just want. So back in India, like there's a lot of students who are not non-design, who come from non-design colleges, who are trying to come from other courses into design. And here also, I've seen a lot of people. Today morning hike, John did a really good hike. John Rodriguez is there. He did a fantastic hike. So there's a lot of students came, and they're also design students, right? So, like, I'm just really like, I really don't know the answer. Even when I was talking with a senior recruiter, hey, you tell me, bro, you are in design. Like, what's happening in the market and everything. So, I just want to understand, like, what you guys three folks think about this. Like, just two questions, right, to keep it very little. Do you think we should hire younger designers and just put it blankly? And if so, what should we expect from them? Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, I think, I mean, the way our hiring has changed is to really look for people with more of a startup mindset, you know, people who are going to be scrappy, who are going to have some grit to like go through kind of tough times and figure it out. More generalist than specialists at this point. You know, I do think there's a place for it. There's a time and a place for it. And there's, you know, so many people have that T shape where you're really deep in something, but I think we're tending to look a little bit more for that horizontal right now in a you know, a product building team. I don't know what about you guys?
I think it's kind of interesting what you said, like the horizontal versus the T. It almost like reflects where I think the tools are even going today a little bit, where it's like it's so easy to go super deep on one idea, right? But it's really hard to go broad. And maybe back to the burnout, like that could be a reason that adds to it. But yeah, completely agree.
So I'll add a bit of controversy into the mix just to make it fun. I think it really just depends on the outcome, because a lot of us here are talking about product design, but we also recognize there's a lot of different kinds of design. And we have some really amazing generalists that can do a lot of things quite well, but there are times where we need to hire a specialist motion designer because we have a complex idea that we need to communicate, and the generalist just isn't cutting it. And that can be the same for brand design, and that can be the same for other types of specialization within design. So I do agree that when you're staffing a team, especially if you're a startup or you have that startup mentality, that having that generalist is really important. That being said, there definitely is still a place for specialists, whether it be 3D or whether it be brand or motion. And when you see individuals that can really do that at another level of craft, it doesn't mean they need to be on your team full time, but there's definitely times and places to bring them in. Again, that's why studios and specialized agencies are becoming more and more increasingly popular, especially for that type of work that only really a specialist can come in and execute at that very high level. So again, depending on your organization and depending on what kind of hiring you want to do, I do agree that having the baseline generalist is really important, but not expecting every generalist to be an expert in everything.
I totally agree. I actually think it's the scrappiness is more important, really. It's like the ability to change. You know, are you going to come in and be like, nope, I'm only doing this particular thing? Or are you going to go in and be like, kind of have a growth mindset and be willing to learn new ways of doing things, maybe a different way than you did before? That just feels necessary in these times.
I would agree with you, though, that this idea of having UX versus UI designers is very antiquated. It's something that we saw like 10 years ago, but now you even question, does that exist? When someone says like, oh, I'm a strategic designer, and you're like, okay, does that mean you don't know how to do UI? Because that's kind of unacceptable at this point. Or even for things like user research, it's so important, but it's really something that, from, in my perspective, every product designer should know how to do, at least with a baseline understanding. And the same for strategy, right? We talk about people having a flexible mindset and also these product builders, but if you're a great product designer, you're a strategic product designer. Doesn't mean that's your only role to think about strategy, but it means that strategy should be integrated into every product and design decision that you're making. So in that sense, this generalist role encompasses things that 10 years ago people were hired as specialists to do, but now the specialists that we're seeing being hired are very craft-oriented, and it's very technical. And yes, we can use AI for maybe 80% of that, but if you really want that 100% or as close to perfection as you can get, that's when it makes sense to bring on and supplement your team with someone who knows design systems really well or knows, brand identity really well, and that's where the place for those folks do tend to come in.
I think your question was a little bit around like new designers though too. And I really do feel for people who are in school, people who are just graduating, because what's happening now really behooves more senior people who have developed the judgment and can look at something very quickly and know exactly what's wrong with it. Like if you're in school right now and studying engineering, that's tough, my brother works for UCF, University of Central Florida, and my nephew is studying computer science, and it's just going to look totally different. His career is going to be so different from somebody who was doing that before. I feel a little bit the same about design. I think I felt lucky because my program was really conceptual. It was like, kind of teaching you how to think. And I think that's just a little bit more future-proof. So that's what I would recommend. Show your thinking, your logic, your rationale, and your willingness to learn. And I think those will take you, pretty far.
Let's do one more question over here.
Hey, appreciate it. Alec, give you a little context. Thank you for being here. I'm coming from a Series A, founding designer, where we have about 30, roughly, people, and I'm building AI systems to help enable everyone become a builder. So the adoption is a little challenging to pull everyone into that space. And there are design decisions, there's product getting pushed without my knowing. And I'm coming back. Even today, I saw a handful of features that have gotten released to the product, and when I see it, I'm like, design debt. I'm gonna have to go back, look at it. So can you speak to me a little bit about how you handle product alignment now that we have started to move incredibly fast with cloud design, tagging, more stakeholders, all this?
Ooh, you hit a sore spot, I think. Everybody wants to kind of think that you're a real team, and real teams communicate, and real teams are on the same page. And I just don't think that's the reality. You all have your kind of individual interests, but collectively, we've been able to agree on these processes, and now that is out the window because the process is a little bit more democratized for people who had these built-in checks against their power, And I think that design needs to change a little bit. I don't think that design can keep being in the position where, we're the only ones that have taste, I do think that, I've seen design fluency, has really increased over the last 10 years, just our ability to perceive what is good design and what is bad design collectively as humans has gotten so much better. And I think that will happen again. And so I think designers need to kind of choose where you want to spend your attention. Do you want to fight those details and kind of fight progress and fight somebody else trying an idea? Or do you want to spend more time kind of chewing on a real gnarly problem and spending more time where you think it's going to make a big difference? The other thing I think we have to get used to is just like experimentation and being okay with putting something that is a little bit rougher out there. You know, I'm coming from Medium, who has such a strong legacy of good design, and we've had to really adapt to be like, no, we have to be okay with the product changing, and like, you know, it's gotta. Sometimes it has to not work in order to take a risk and for something to feel like it's alive. So I just think that we have to change our perspective a little bit and some of the ways in which we work.
If I can add too, I'm just imagining you walk in Monday morning and everything's on fire. You're like, what? That's exhausting. In design systems, at least, the biggest fear was always, we don't want to feel like a speed bump to this team, right? And I think a big job for you, and I've been a solo designer, and I totally feel like your pain, is not only design now, but now working with the team more and trying to even become more of a leader on the team of like, hey, it's awesome that you put that out there. These things didn't really work that well, or I would have done them a little bit differently because of A, B, and C that we've done in the past, or maybe that we're going towards, and then sharing that. And now all of a sudden, like, you are running a bit of a governance and like contribution model that I think is going to be really important these next couple of years. Because if I'm on your team and I'm like, if I push something out and you're like, Joey, why'd you do that? You know, I'm like, I'm never talking to you again. I'm just going to go do that, right? But if I'm like, wow, like, I've got an awesome partnership with you that I didn't have yesterday. Now I'm like, wait, I feel like I can do more and I can do it well because I have your approval. That's awesome. And that's going to elevate your career. That's going to elevate that person. And it's going to prevent you from ever feeling like this speed bump that people have to circumvent.
That's a nice approach. I want to work with Joe.
Yeah. It's hard to do. It's really difficult.
Yeah.
And you know what? Maybe just one more thing. Like, at least in the world of design systems, where this often comes up, this feeling of like a speed bump is when you introduce design systems at the very end of the design process, whatever that looks like now, right? And so, if I could offer one encouragement to you, is like start those conversations, even if they're not relevant to what's being worked on, but like start them early, where you're kind of like, you're kind of like tagging along with them throughout their ride on the work, not necessarily just swooping in at the end to like shut it down. That was a big lesson for me over the years. That's a great question.
All right, got time for one more.
Yeah, thank you everybody for sharing all these insights. And I had a question for Joey, and been a fan of Joey for a long time.
Thanks, John.
I do believe like design systems going to be the core infrastructure for agents and product teams and things like that. But where do you think the design system would exist? Where the medium of design system would exist?
So where the medium of design systems will exist over the next couple of years? Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I've been struggling a lot with that because, like, I mean, it's no secret. I love Figma. I love being in the tool. I love building libraries. And I think I went through a bit of an identity crisis in my own career, which is like, wow, like Figma, you know, it's real. I think we're all excited for this week, right? Because like we all feel like Figma's changing a little bit. We're excited to see what happens and maybe to put some of our worries to rest. I see it actually just becoming more. I think the answer is in production. And I think by that, it then comes into code and it goes into Storybook and it goes back to Figma. And but I think like at the root of it is kind of what we talked about earlier, where it's like design systems aren't components, they're not tokens, they're not, you know, the fun stuff, so to speak, all the time. Like they're the decisions and they're the relationships that you build. It sounds kind of hand wavy, but like, gosh, it's true, you know. And so where that shakes up, I don't know. I think we're going to see this week a little bit. I think we're going to see over the next couple of years. But I also think Flexxi, like being flexible, and like it's important to let, like, I always thought a design system started in Figma, right? You got to see the thing, and now it's like that couldn't be less true. So I don't know, but I think we're going to find out.
Can I tell you a little story?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So our head of content found these old news clippings about writing, and from 1876, writing is dead. And then from 1907, nobody writes anymore. And then, 1956, writing is definitely dead, And, it's just funny because
Final.
people say that these mediums, and it is like a tool, TV, radio, are dead when it's really just kind of a new mode of looking at something. And I think that if you are focused on your purpose, you will find a way to serve somebody's need. So like for Medium, all of our business has been totally disrupted by how Google search is changing. So many businesses have. And so we're trying to find, as writing moves into private spaces, how are we serving that need? So I think you will adapt, and the medium itself will mean something different. You'll find a different way to apply it. So I like that you are focusing on kind of on the primitives of design systems.
Yeah, I'd be like, where do things live when Photoshop's not the main tool anymore, right? And you'd be like, I don't know. But I think it's really similar. That's a great point. Yeah.
Just one thing to add there, and this is just riffing off of what Casey and Joey were saying. I think if you've been in the industry long enough, you've seen so much circularity to the way that things are. Again, going back to this Booking.com experience of 2017, there was this big push for designers that code, and then there was this big push for designers that don't code. And now it's back again, and we'll probably see multiple iterations of this. Same with things like, design systems are dead. Well,
they're back.
Yeah, not exactly. I mean, we're seeing more need for strong foundations more than ever. And so this is something that we're seeing again and again. We're seeing, again, going back to the visual design aspect, because I think it's not talked about enough in this general space, where there's this big push towards handmade craft, and something is unique and special, and we've seen it through all the different iterations. So back to the question of our friend who was asking about early and career designers, I think now is the time to just take a breath and stay calm and understand that these things all go in circles. And so it really is just about that adaptability, but also knowing that the only certainty is that change is inevitable, and it will probably change multiple more times in all of our careers, and that's something that we just have to understand and get used to, and really only thinking about things in small increments of time, because that's really the only thing you can control. Like, what does the next 3 months look like? What does the next 6 months look like? Not even trying to look 5 years into the future, because it's definitely going to change, not even 5 years, but even 12 months. If we meet back here again at the next config and have the same iteration of this conversation, it will probably look very different.
Probably tomorrow, like you said.
Yeah, honestly.
I mean, if we're lucky, it will change, because that keeps things exciting.
Yeah, thank you. All right, can I get a round of applause for our panel here? Thank you all for coming. The party's not over. There's still drinks back here. There's food. There's t-shirts to be printed. If you didn't know, we're also doing full headshots back here if you need a new LinkedIn photo. So thank you so much for coming.
Thanks,
Come say
everyone.
hi.
Thanks, Elliot.